I'm no let's intervene everywhere type like McCain or Graham or Rubio and that sort of thing. But on the other hand, I'm not a pacifist. That is, I'm not a moron. I know there are enemies out there. And we have to be prepared for them. They're not hiding. They're out there in open daylight, showing us what they're capable of, showing us what they're going to do.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Levin TV. Welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Breaking. Biden called Peter Doocy a pretty lousy name. Peter Doocy's a very nice young man. You can tell he's very respectful. He's not Jim Acosta or one of the other exhibitionists there in the White House press room. He asks tough questions, but that's the job of a person in the press. And in this case, he asked the president a question about inflation because they were told they couldn't ask questions about Russia. So others were asking about economic matters. He asked about inflation, and then Biden attacks him. And we're starting to see why maybe Hunter Biden is the way that he is. I'm just guessing. So Peter Doocy was on Hannity last night. It was actually very, very compelling. Take a look at this. Go.
Biden took a slightly different tone today, didn't want to answer any questions, and he called our own Peter Doocy a stupid son of a bitch. Really? Take a look.
Would you take questions on inflation? Do you think inflation is a political liability?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
Now, let's stop there. Now, he knew he was on a live mic. He had to know he was on a live mic. It's not like this, where guys are, fooling around, figuring out production and no, he just spoke. Right, guys? So he had to know he was on a live mic, which is why he was going like this, because he knew. So, of course, it's going to pick that up. Go ahead.
Stupid son of a bitch. Mr. Unity strikes again. In all seriousness, Joe Biden really shouldn't be casting stones from an extremely fragile glass house. Here with reaction, Fox News White House correspondent Peter Doocy, who has an update on the story. First, what was your reaction? Words don't matter to me. I remember during the Trump years, everybody would feign the vapors. Oh, the president said this. I think I know you pretty well. You're a pretty tough guy. What was your reaction initially when you heard what happened?
My reaction, Sean, was delayed because, as you can see in that clip, the Biden staff were ushering us out. They were telling us, okay, thank you, time to go. And you can see right there that people are just starting to move towards the door, myself included. It wasn't until we went to the basement and then outside and then back to the press room that somebody said, hey, did you hear what the president said about you? I said, no. What did he say? He said he called you a stupid SOB. And I was thinking, I did not hear that. And I went downstairs and I opened up my phone and he did. And so my response was delayed. But Sean, and we have some news tonight. After years of clips of the president and I kind of mixing it up on the campaign trail and during the transition and here at the White House, within about an hour of that exchange, he called my cell phone and he said, it's nothing personal, pal. And we went back and forth and we were talking about just kind of moving forward. And I made sure to tell him that I'm always going to try to ask something different than what everybody else is asking. And he said, you've got to. And that's a quote from the president. So I'll keep doing it.
So let's just wait there. So he didn't apologize. That's not an apology. That's Joe Biden. Remember I told you the story? My wife and I are on an Amtrak minding our own business. And we go from Washington. We're going from Washington to New York. And in comes the Bidens. So I put my head down. I don't want the eyes to me like, oh, geez. So anyway, he He wasn't running for anything back then, except his seat. And he was dressed to the T's with his tie, and he sits towards the back. They had saved a couple seats for him because Joe's known to ride on the Amtrak. After all, his son was on the board, you know. And Dr. Jill Biden was there with her stethoscope. No, I'm just kidding. But she was apparently sitting across from him, and they went somewhere, and she got off, maybe in Philly or something, and he was still there. So I said to my wife, Julie, well, I got to go to the bathroom. I mean, after all, I'm not a camel. So I guess I got to walk by him. So I got up, and I'm walking by, and our eyes do meet. And he gave me a Valentine. No, what happened was, I said, how are you, Mr. Vice President? He wasn't Vice President, but to be respectful, and he looks at me and he says, you're a smartass. So I looked at him. You know, I couldn't level the guy. He was already sitting. He was Vice President, older guy. I said, I was just going to say, do you normally travel without protection? It's dangerous out there. And he said, well, I appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you. And that was the extent of it. And then I went and got a hot dog. So anyway, he's got a foul mouth. Do you remember that clip where he says to Obama, where Obama's going up to the podium, and they got their Obamacare, and he says to Obama, whispering like he was there, you know, doing his John McCain. And he says, this is a big effing, but he says the word, big effing deal. Now, be honest. Do you ever hear me use the F word around here? Do I? I don't like that word, to be honest with you. There are other words I'll use, like a horse is. I won't call anybody any names around here, do I? Seriously. So, I mean, liberals, yes, why not? So, but I'm talking about the people I work with, or the people who are immediately around me. This guy's been in public office his entire life. He's got no class. He has no class. He's a street guy, or he pretends to be a street guy. You know, when what's-his-name was here, and the hair on my leg went up, and I had a chain, and you're such a clown. So Joe Biden has an issue with reporters. He really does. So did Trump. But the reporters still have this love-hate relationship with Biden. Or maybe it's just that they're used to being in an abused family of this kind, public family, and they will take whatever they have to take to advance the cause. And Joe Biden is advancing their cause as much as he can. He's just an incompetent boob. So let's take a look at this where he lashes out against reporters. And you'll also notice something else. Even when Trump lashed out, he was in control. He would say, you, and you said this, and you said... You never heard him yell at the top of his lungs or anything like that. But Biden does. Why? Because he's unhinged, that's why. Go.
Ask the right questions.
What a stupid son of a bitch.
Come on, man. That's like saying you, before you got in this program, if you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not, what do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
What do you say?
Go back and read what I said.
Wait. You're getting nervous, man.
That is an interesting reading of English. I assume you got in the journalism because you like to write.
I want to talk about happy things, man. What the hell? What do you do all the time? So when did I say I was confident? I said what I said was, let's get it straight.
I think I probably have a much higher IQ than you do, I suspect.
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that? Who said that?
I know you'd ask it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign. Right up your alley. Those are questions you always ask.
You don't understand that. You're in the wrong business.
Can I ask you a quick question on Israel before you drive away?
No, you can't. Not unless you get in front of the car as I step on it. You can ask an obnoxious question.
Don't screw around with me. Let's get it straight.
You didn't use a rape reference?
No, let me listen to me.
I'm listening.
Why are you the only guy that always shouts out questions? So don't poke that in my face, okay, buddy? But only you would ask that. You're a good man. You're a good man.
Thank you, guys. This is all the time we...
Thinks he's so tough, this guy. You know how I know he's not tough? And my man, Josh, knows this too. He has the perfect nose. Have you noticed that, Josh? It's like the perfect straight nose. The cartilage has never been touched, nothing. If you're a tough guy, typically you have a broken nose. I'm not kidding. You'll have a very serious deviated septum, something like that. And that's just for starts. Maybe you have a little cauliflower looking ears here and there, or a scar here and there. He's like perfect with his nose. Got the hair, the cornrows grown in and everything else. But you understand my point? He's never been a tough guy. He grew up in a relatively wealthy area around Wilmington. He goes to law school. He gets elected to the Wilmington City Council because of his deep knowledge, not because he's a Democrat. Gets elected to the U.S. Senate when he's 29. He's sworn in when he turns 30, and that's what he's done his whole life. He's lunch bucket stuff. It's all a bunch of crap. There's nothing about Lunch Bucket Joe or any of that stuff. Scranton when he was 5 years old. I don't even know where the hell I was when I was 5 years old, but he plays up the Scranton stuff. He's been in Washington, D.C., treated as a king since he was 30 years old. He's 78, 79 years old. That's the bottom line. He does not connect with the American people very well. He didn't do the kinds of jobs that most Americans have to do in order to work their way up. Some people intuitively understand this, even if they haven't. He does not. He doesn't intuitively understand anything, but he's always been a very nasty guy. He was nasty to Bob Bork. He was nasty to Clarence Thomas. He was nasty to all kinds of judicial nominees. They never really pursued the Tara Reade story. There she was in her 20s. Innocent young lady wanting to work for somebody she admired enormously, and he molests her. Why would she come forward and say this if it wasn't true? Because she knew all the crap she was going to take. And by the way, the contemporary events seem to underscore what she said. The Larry King show and so forth, but it's all right. He's a Democrat. He gets a pass. Now, Biden made it clear early on in his so-called presidency that if you treat somebody with disrespect and you're on my staff, I'm going to fire you. Because Biden would never have that. Here's when he said it. Go.
We have such an awful lot to do, but I know you. I know your heart, your dedication, your commitment to this nation. And I know you can do it. And we're going to do it by leading with one core American value: humility and trust, collegiality, diversity.
Wait a minute. That's 4 so far. Go ahead.
And I want to thank your family for the sacrifices. But I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot.
Now, first of all, they just gathered. It's January 20th. It's the afternoon. They're all there. You can see the propaganda. You can see what's going on the screen there. Thanks for coming and your sacrifice. But if you mistreat somebody, I'm going to fire you on the spot. They're all going, what the hell did I just sign up for? What did I just sign up for? Now, more to the point, and the point is, he mistreats people all the time, including some of these individuals we're talking about. Now, I have to confess, I don't really mind slapping the press around here and there. I really don't. Because many of them are obnoxious. Most of them aren't really journalists. They're pushing an agenda and so forth. But what Biden objects to is when they ask some serious questions, because he's not used to that. Remember, he ran his whole campaign out of the basement. He ran his whole campaign where we saw the back of his head, not the front of his face, because he was walking away. He didn't take many questions. Remember all this stuff? Still doesn't, but even less during the course of the campaign. They were so concerned that he'd screw up, because he's a screw-up. But now, every now and then, they're asking a question like on inflation. Oh, that's big meat. Big meat did inflation. What are you talking about? That's big meat. The border. Oh, that's the prior administration. You know, they screwed up. They didn't secure the border. Yes, they did, of course. And things of that sort. So, there you have it. All right, look. Some of you are going to disagree with me, but I can't help it. I think most of you will agree with me. We have enemies in this world. There are evil people running some of these countries out there. Otherwise, why have a military? Why even talk about a border? Why have cops? Why have anything? If really everybody is getting along swimmingly. What about Putin? Putin was a second-rate, second-tier KGB agent. A vicious, vile little killer. And he blackmailed his way to the top. He blackmailed his way to the top. He promised top officials that they would not be prosecuted for graft after the fall of the Soviet Union. But he wanted to be the top dog. And that was what he got in exchange for not prosecuting some of these people and allowing them to get rich. Ever since then, he's held on. And he's not going to let go. I think that's pretty obvious. And he's got a so-called assembly, or whatever you want to call it, that is basically a rubber stamp. He wants to be president. He wants to be premier. He's the de facto dictator of the Russian regime. He's very upset about the collapse of the Soviet Union as an ex-KGB guy. People who challenge him, they wind up dead, poisoned by the kind of poison that can only be provided by a government, apparently. But in any event, he now wants Ukraine. You know, he's taken a chunk of Georgia, he's taken the Crimea, which was part of Ukraine. Now he wants Ukraine. And there are some people in our country, you know, like back in the 1920s, a lot of conservatives were isolationists. Some of that is back today, as perhaps too big of a chunk of the Republican Party. Well, what do we have to do with Ukraine? What do we have to do with the Middle East? What do we have to do with all these things? And so why do you think we created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? To protect Belgium after the war? No, to protect us. So we would have these countries, some were allies, some were not, some were conquered by the Nazis, some were not, some were part of the Soviet circle as a defense for us. Why do we have bases in Europe as a defense for us? You know, it's hard to get troops from the West Coast or the East Coast to all over the world, so we have forward bases, and the goal is so strategically, and we can better protect ourselves and save American lives. How many men died fighting in Europe? Lots and lots. So we just give it up? You know, we didn't conquer it, we didn't keep it, we're not the Soviets, but we built alliances there. And we built democracies there. And so that's very important. Well, why are we there? Why are we there? Why do you think they're building hypersonic missiles? Why do you think Russia's building hypersonic missiles? To attack Ukraine on its border? They don't need hypersonic missiles for that. Why do you think they have modernized their nuclear arsenal? To attack Kiev? I guess now they call it Kev. Hey, Kev. No. Why do you think the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran is building ICBMs and wants nuclear warheads? Why? So they can hit Tel Aviv? Yes. But you don't need ICBMs to hit Tel Aviv. You need them to hit Los Angeles. You need them to hit New York. You need them to hit America. Oh, okay. Why do you think the communist Chinese have built hypersonic missiles, now have more military ships than we do, have a bigger standing army than we do? Why do you think they have killer satellites in space? To knock out our GPS systems, so our military is blind, potentially to knock out our grid? You think it's there because of Taiwan? Our enemy views us as the enemy. And they're not bound by their boundaries. And so we have an element in our own country, and I'm sad to say, sort of the Bernie Sanders wing when it comes to foreign policy and the military within the Republican Party. I'm no let's intervene everywhere type like McCain or Graham or Rubio and that sort of thing. But on the other hand, I'm not a pacifist. That is, I'm not a moron. I know there are enemies out there. And we have to be prepared for them. They're not hiding. They're out there in open daylight, showing us what they're capable of, showing us what they're going to do. And we talked about this here briefly months ago. You know, we have an arrangement with the Ukraine, so does Russia, and so does Britain. In 1994, when Clinton was president, the Russians wanted the nuclear arms out of Ukraine. Remember, that country broke up. Well, Ukraine was the second biggest part of it. Other than Russia, Ukraine is the second most populated, biggest part of what was the Soviet Union. Well, they had nuclear weapons there. They had nuclear missiles, missile silos. And so in exchange for getting them back, the Russians, an agreement was reached in a memorandum. The agreement was between Russia, the United States, the UK, and Ukraine. as an independent country. And that agreement said that all 4 countries would recognize Ukraine's sovereignty and help protect it. And help protect it. It didn't even say, Russia, you'll leave us alone. No, Russia agreed to help protect Ukraine's sovereignty. So they don't have any nuclear missiles anymore. They gave them all up. And here we are, 18 years later, where they're being threatened. And already, the Russians have their militia, effectively their Hezbollah, in eastern Ukraine, attacking that government, attacking the people there, trying to overthrow the government there. They had a puppet government before the last couple of governments, but the people overthrew it. And Putin didn't like that. So that's what Putin is all about. And here's another problem. 4 NATO countries border Ukraine. 4. And so this is a big deal. And if we don't stand up for what we believe, and I don't mean we need a complete ground war, then it's only going to get worse. What happened after Afghanistan gave Putin motivation to act, is what he's doing. The Iranians today are shooting missiles into the UAE, the Emirates. And that's an ally of ours. It's an ally of the moderate Gulf states. It's an ally of Israel's now. They signed a peace deal. It is, believe it or not, even though it's a monarchy, it's one of the freest in the Middle East. But it's a tiny country with a very small military. We had to send our Air Force there to intercept some of their missiles. And the Iranians are also using the Houthis in Yemen to try and overthrow Saudi Arabia. Yemen is right on the border with Saudi Arabia. And the Houthis have created horrific acts of carnage and genocide in Yemen. This is what they do, these regimes. Iran is also working with China, selling them their oil. And this is because Biden's in power, and he allows them to do it. And he's going to allow them to do it. He even asked South Korea and allowed South Korea to pay Iran's UN dues last week. This gets almost no attention whatsoever. Almost no attention at all. And so you also see the inbred in North Korea firing off missiles. I think 3 or 4 of them now. He's having a grand old time. It's like his birthday, or he's firing them off like they're fireworks. All this is going on now. My concern is Russia moves into Ukraine and all kinds of things happen based on that, things you can predict and things that are unpredictable, because battles are unpredictable. And then China sees an opportunity to move on Taiwan. All the focus now is on Russia and Ukraine, and there needs to be a lot. Now, let me tell you a little secret. This right now is a 2-front potential problem that we have. China and Russia, in my personal view, are coordinating. They're communicating with each other. Why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they be? At the same time, we've, again, hollowed out our military. Despite all the spending, Joe Biden is not increasing effectively the military budget. It's flatlined. There's been extremely low morale in the military because of all this critical race theory junk, because individuals are being compelled through mandates to get vaccinated who don't want to be, and also because their social media is being look what you posted when you were 14 and a half years old. That sort of thing is going on. I said to my wife, Julie, I mentioned this on radio, really about 2 weeks ago, maybe it was a week ago. And to my mother-in-law, Sylvia, I said to both of them, with the buildup of our enemies like this, and when you consider who's running the American military and who's the President of the United States and who runs Congress, I'm not sure we could win a war, an all-out war. I'm not sure. Not because of the American people. Certainly not all of them, but half the country's woke. What do we fight over most of the time? The left's agenda. Oh, you must be a racist. Why? Because you're white. Well, what are you talking about? Or I have a right that you should give me this, 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 and this. Now, through government program, I have a right to family leave. I have a right to the to this kind of a benefit. I have a right to this kind of a subsidy. It's like, what are you talking about? So the entire psychology has changed from the 1940s to 2022 in so many regards. That's what worries me. And of course, the man in the Oval Office worries me a lot. Let me put it to you this way. If you're Russia, put aside your American patriotism for a second. Just play this thought out, this thinking with me. You're Russia, you're China, you're Iran, and so forth. Don't you see this as an opportunity? Don't you say to yourself, my God, look at the good fortune we have here? Particularly if you've analyzed what took place in Afghanistan. Particularly if you analyze what they're doing with Iran bending over backwards while that regime is moving full speed ahead towards nukes. You're saying to yourselves, what a good fortune. If we don't act now during this guy's presidency, while that dope is Secretary of State and the other dope is Secretary of Defense and these generals are as weak as generals we've ever seen, we're going to miss our window of opportunity. That's what I worry about. That's what I worry about. I don't think these wars are concocted by, defense contractors. You hear people talk about that, or this is a blame America situation where you hear so-called conservatives, really pseudo-conservatives who sound like the left. Oh, it's America's fault. People who love Russia or love China who are paid off by China. No. America hasn't done a damn thing to deserve any of this, except we've installed a president who's incapable of defending us. All right, so let's take a look at this from NBC Today. Go.
This morning, the dangerous and escalating actions of Vladimir Putin along Ukraine's border could send thousands of American troops overseas. 8,500 U.S. soldiers and service members are now on heightened alert, ready to be sent to Europe to join a NATO response force.
Let me just add that that's true. And there's about 60,000 American troops in Europe. Probably there used to be many more, mostly in Germany, who are also on heightened alert. Not to go to war directly with the Russians, but I told you about these NATO countries that are on the border, and the fear is the Russians will cut through Ukraine and then start gobbling up little pieces of these other countries and saying, oh, this was always Russian, this was always Russian, this was always Russian. That's the fear now. Go ahead.
No final decision has been made to deploy them.
But President Biden did commit publicly to make U.S. troops available if the 30-nation NATO alliance needs more military help.
Well, we're going to fortify our NATO allies.
Monday, in the Situation Room, he met by video conference with 8 European leaders. Last week, the president said there were differences among leaders, but now he claims they're in full agreement.
I had a very, very, very good meeting, total unanimity with all the European leaders.
Pressure is building as Putin defies demands to pull back. As U.S. officials say Russia continues to build up troops near Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense releasing video of its forces preparing readiness checks.
They have not only shown no signs of de-escalating, but they are in fact adding more force capability.
A disturbing sign that pushed NATO to ask member nations to do more.
I welcome that allies are stepping up.
The White House is putting the risks in stark terms.
We have been very clear, and the president has been direct, that military action by Russia could come at any time.
Vice President Harris traveling in Milwaukee with a warning for Putin.
I can't tell you what he's going to do, but we are prepared to take decisive action if he moves in an aggressive manner into Ukraine.
What do you think Putin's response is to his inner circle when he listens to her? Think he takes her seriously? Think he's worried about her? No, I don't think he's worried about her at all. I'll tell you, I'm also worried about NATO. Some of these countries are very weak, not just militarily, but in terms of resolve. So the timing couldn't be worse for the United States, I'll tell you. Go ahead.
Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer asked the White House to set up in-person briefings on Ukraine for all members of the House and Senate, and plans for that are moving forward.
Well, gee willikers. So that's the situation. We are not in the best position we should be. You have to look at us facing at least a two-front situation with communist China and fascistic Russia, with Xi and Putin, who seem to get along swimmingly. Our force structure is not what it needs to be. The Russians have been building up their military and their force structure, so have the communist Chinese, in very significant ways. They're trained for war outside their own regional area. We have great troops too, despite what's being done to them, but things are being done to them that should not be done to them. They should be focused 100% on fighting and winning wars. I just don't think we're focused properly. You look at Congress today, what are they focused on? Destroying Donald Trump, who's a private citizen. Destroying our separation of powers and our constitutional construct, destroying our voting system, and spending more money and adding to inflation. How many floor debates have there been about what Russia's doing and what China's doing? How many demands have there been that the Biden administration reveal to Congress what they're negotiating with the Iranian regime? Nothing. You hear nothing about this. It's really too damn bad. But we're going to keep an eye on this. But to me, this could become an extremely grave situation. Not because we did anything wrong, not because defense contractors want war to make money, not even because Joe Biden wants war. It's because our enemy sees that Joe Biden is weak, that he's done provocative things that motivate them, and that the Democrats in Congress have harmed us too. As a footnote, I'll give you an example. 7 months ago, the United States Senate, on a bipartisan level, passed a bill to assist our companies that produce computer chips to produce more of them and to expand their facilities here on an emergency basis. That bill has been languishing in the House of Representatives under Nancy Pelosi for 7 months. And, you know, we need to become self-sufficient in a whole host of areas, pharmaceuticals, other materials, manufacturing. We're not going to be if this keeps up. Why would Pelosi and the Democrats do this? You need to read a book called Red-Handed by Peter Schweitzer, and you'll know why. Because so many of them are on the take. I'm just being honest with you. All right, we'll see you next time on Levin TV.